Hey, Bill.
Hey, Nick.
How can we discern if somebody who's like prophesying, like my buddy went to this like Pentecostal church and met some like people that prophesied, and it was like legit, like they had spoken to his past and present and future, and it was like real, you know. But how can you tell when it's a cult in nature or like godly, like good?
Yeah, I have students tell me all the time, this person prophesied over me, this or that, and to me, it's just like I have to wait and see if it comes true or not. That's the mark of a true prophet is it's got to come true, and if it's not, you're supposed to stone them to death. But so it's a lot of pressure there. Um, but you have to wait and see if it comes true or not, and that's why it's so easily manipulated, and that's what's scary about it. So you just have to wait and see. You know. Hopefully they would have some stories or testimonies to support that some stuff has already come true through them.
Pastor, in Proverbs, no, what we were just reading, the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 8, some of that sounds like wisdom is Jesus personified. It says like he was there when God was creating the world.
Yes.
It's chapter 8.
Yes.
I noticed that ages ago. I don't have my real Bible with me to tell you the specific lines and stuff.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think Jesus is wisdom personified. Yeah, I think he's a personification of wisdom. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just a little confused with the story of the eunuch traveling 800 miles. If he was not Jewish, why would he go and worship in Jerusalem
Yep.
during the Jewish holidays?
Yeah, I don't even know if it was during the Jewish holidays or not. I don't think it gives us a time frame of when he was there. But we see Gentiles popping up in Scripture all the time with the relationship with the Lord. We see it with, and we don't know how. We don't know, like Rahab says, we heard how God dried up the sea for you. Well, God dried up the sea for them, and then they walked through the wilderness, but the message of it got to them before the people got to them, right? So she said, we heard how the Lord did this and that for you, and she's a Gentile who believed it. And so we see Gentiles popping up in Scripture as believers. And the Bible doesn't go through how they came to faith, just that they have it. So I don't know how it got to the eunuch in Ethiopia. But, this would be a whole nother teaching. But Paul in Romans, he'll say things about the gospel and go, well, have they not heard? And he'll say, of course they've heard, because their line has gone out through all the earth. And you go, well, what's this line talk that's gone out through all the earth? That's actually astronomical talk. That's astronomy talk. Almost like they should know from the stars type of thing. And I believe that's a reference to Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. And I believe with all my heart, Revelation 12, the first paragraph of Revelation 12, where John says, I saw a great sign in the heavens. It was a woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet, 12 stars around her head, and a fiery red dragon next to her. She's about to give birth to a male child who will rule all the nations with a rod of iron. Can't figure out who that might be. We can, it's Jesus. I thought you'd laugh, but you didn't. And then the dragon, as soon as she gives birth, tries to kill the male child. So who's the dragon? It's Herod, right? He tries to kill Jesus, right? And fleeing to the wilderness for 1,260 days. What does Mary and Joseph do after they give birth to the child? Flee to Egypt. I'm going to guess for 1,260 days maybe. We're not told. But so believe it or not, in that description right there, many scholars, and I agree with them, conclude that we were just given Jesus' birth date as September 11th, 3 BC. Because that exact description of the sky happened that day, 3 BC, September 11th, in the sky. And some of that is that in the constellation Virgo, which is the Virgin, right? There's a virgin in the gospel story, isn't there? So the constellation Virgo, on September 11, 3 BC, and this is all, solid NASA stuff. We know exactly where every star is and every day, correct? Past and future. And the sun crossed through Virgo in a way that clothed her. In other words, it went from her neck to her knees. She was clothed in the sun, and the moon was at her feet on that day. In addition to that, the constellation Scorpio, with the scorpion and the tail that comes down, at the edge of that tail, there was like no stars in the sky. And Revelation says the tail swept a third of the stars from the sky. And next to, on the other side of Virgo, was Leo, which is the lion, right? Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. And in Leo is Regulus, the star Regulus, which we get our word regal from. It's the king star because of its brightness. And we have the king planet, Jupiter, was in Leo. And Jupiter has this retrograde action where it actually stops and goes back in its course. So there was a point in time on September 11, 3 BC, that Jupiter went right alongside Regulus. Now, what would that look like in the night sky? Something we call the Star of Bethlehem, right? This burning bright star. And what's making the Star of Bethlehem? King star, king planet. King is born, right? What constellation? Leo, okay, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Next to what constellation? Virgo, the virgin, who's clothed with the sun with the moon at her feet on that same date that Regulus and Jupiter are side by side in the sky in Leo. And on the other side is Scorpio with the tail that looked like it cleaned out the sky of stars because there's no stars around its tail. And like I said, that matches the census and the people that were in power in that time. And it fits all the details of one date in history, September 11, 2003. 3 BC. 2,000 years ago, 3 BC is what I think my brain was doing. Yeah, 3 BC. Why am I talking about that? Why? Oh, yeah, because it talks about, the line. So when Paul says they've heard, because their line has gone out through all the earth. And so, I know scholars that say they think Paul's talking about the declaration. God said the stars are for times and seasons and signs. So that's a sign. Certainly the Star of Bethlehem. The Magi said we saw his sign in the sky. Another whole teaching will be Isaiah 6, where Isaiah challenges King Ahaz, ask a sign from the Lord, make it as high as heaven or as low as Sheol. And Ahaz refuses to do it. He says the Lord himself will give you a sign. And the sign that he's given is a virgin giving birth to a child. So when the virgin gives birth to a child, what's the sign that's as high as heaven? I'm going to suggest it's the Star of Bethlehem. Was the sign that they got as high as heaven. And again, it'll take a long time to unpack, but the sign that I think is as low as Sheol or hell is when the shepherds hear from the angels, and the angels said, the sign, so now we're getting the sign talk again, is you'll find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger. Now, seeing a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths is not a sign. Almost all babies are swaddled in cloths. The sign is that he's lying in a manger. And why is that a sign? Because mangers are feeding troughs for animals. Not many people want to put their newborn in an animal feeding trough. In fact, manger is Latin for to eat, the verb to eat. And isn't it fitting that the one that says you have to eat my flesh was born in a trough that is called an eating trough, right? And it's made of stone. It's by far not what our nativity scenes display. And that's why people never realize what the sign is. An accurate nativity scene would have a wooden flat bed for Jesus in the nativity scene that would have a little rim around it to hold the animal food within it. But that also is what a sarcophagus looks like, a stone bed for dead men's bones. And so when the shepherds are told, the sign for you will be a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger, when they approach a manger, they're approaching a stone bed with a baby wrapped up like a mummy. They would mummify bodies like Jesus would have been mummified, the same way they swaddle a baby. So because he's on a stone bed instead of anywhere that a baby should be found, it would have all the appearances of approaching a stillborn child. This had more the appearances of death than life. So as they approach this child with all the appearances of death, when they finally look at the baby's face, what are they going to discover? Despite all the appearances of death, this child's alive. That's the sign. Because it's trying to point you to his tomb scene. Because just like his birth scene is seen through the eyes of Mary and Joseph, so his death scene is seen through the eyes of Mary Magdalene and Joseph of Arimathea. It's another Mary and Joseph at the death scene. And just like angels announce the birth of Jesus, angels announce the resurrection of Jesus from the tomb. And just like he's wrapped in swaddling cloths at birth, he's wrapped in mummifying cloths at death. Just like he was laid in a stone bed at birth, he's laid on a stone bed at death. In other words, God has drawn a direct parallel between his birth and his death in all these different ways. And so the sign from Isaiah, as high as heaven, the Magi say, where is he who's been born, King of the Jews? It's a birth sign. Star of Bethlehem, high as heaven. He's also said, ask a sign as low as Sheol. The sign that's low as Sheol, again, we look for that word sign. The angels say to the shepherds, the sign is a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger. It's a death scene. It's as low as Sheol. It's at the grave. And it's going to resemble his tomb scene. So those are the signs that are given there. So, and that's why I say all of this can't be in a made-up religion. You just can't make all this up, especially when the writers of the Bible aren't teaching you this. You have to discover it. Remember, the Bible says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, the glory of kings to pursue it. That's what I think it's talking about. Because God knows your heart has to be right if you're actually going to want to pursue this stuff, right? If your heart's not right, then you're going to go, whatever, I don't see anything. I don't think there's anything to it. And that's why I think this is the perfect revelation of God. Because this is the perfect means for the person with the right heart to find him, right? But if you don't have the right heart, you ain't going to bother with it. It's literally the perfect test of the heart. And God's always giving us these tests of the heart to see where we're at. What was Abraham's test of the heart? Listen, you're not going to be some average Joe believer. I want you to be the father of the faith. So what kind of test does he get? Sacrifice your son to me. Because if you know who I am, you know you're not going to have to follow through with it. Do you know why Hebrews tells us why Abraham was ready to raise a knife over his son and plunge it into his son's stomach. It says because he knew that Isaac has promises attached to him that are yet unfulfilled. He's supposed to be the person through whom all the nations are blessed. If he dies today, then God broke a promise, and God won't break a promise. And he also learned, remember he was 75 years old when God said you're going to have a son from your own body, right? He didn't have that son for 25 years. What is God doing with that? He's waiting. Hebrews says he waited till Abraham's body was as good as dead, and Sarah's womb was as good as dead. Why? Because when life came out of that deadness, what is Abraham going to learn? God can bring life from death. So when he's told to sacrifice his son, he goes, God can't break a promise, and he can bring life from death. So he can say to the servants, we're going up, we're worshiping, and we are returning to you. And he meant it. We're coming back. Okay? Something's going to happen here. Okay? All right, we have a question over here. After a question over here.
Trying to skip me, are you? I'm just playing.
There's no skipping you, Keith.
I'll start out with the second one that arose just now concerning the manger and the birth. I had heard a few years ago that actually in that area of Bethlehem and the shepherds that were there, that they actually raised and kept the flocks for the temple sacrifices. So,
yeah, perfect.
So here you go.
Perfect.
God is magnificent.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was, do you remember back in the 80s, is on the news about the lost tribe in Ethiopia, and the state of Israel were and they were Ethiopians, just as, no pun intended or anything, making fun of it, they were just as black as charcoal.
Yeah.
Coming over, and thousands and thousands and thousands of them that Israel was bringing back to the Holy Land, from Ethiopia. So I'm bringing that up because of the connection with the Ethiopian eunuch. Do you suppose that the Ethiopian eunuch was, and they, like I said, they agree, the Israelis agree, these are Jewish, our people, okay? And do you think that's where the Ethiopian eunuch, why he came to Israel, when he was there to worship, and was on his way back?
Well, I mean, the gospel was very, very new, obviously, when he received it. And, he received the gospel in Acts chapter 8, which is before Paul received the gospel. The eunuch got the gospel. So, I just think there's much more going on than what the Bible tells us. There's much, much more activity that God is up to than just is in the Bible. In fact, as I mentioned, Paul, Acts 8, 9, and 10, very, very pivotal chapters, because in Acts 8, Ethiopian eunuch, African man, that means he's a son of Ham. Of Noah's son's Ham, he's a Hamite. Next chapter, Saul of Tarsus gets saved. He's Jewish. He becomes the Apostle Paul. He's a son of Shem. He's a Shemite. In Acts chapter 10, did I say 10 for Paul? 9 for Paul. 10 for Cornelius, a Roman centurion. He's an Italian. He's a son of Japheth. So in 8, 9, 10, you get a son of Ham, a son of Shem, a son of Japheth getting saved. What is God saying through that? Gospel's for the whole world. It's for every person. Hamites, Shemites, Japheth, because we're all Hamites, Shemites, Japhethites. Everybody, right? And they're all saved on roads. The eunuch is on the road going from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. Saul's on the road to Damascus. And Cornelius is on a street called Straight, it says. And these are all roads going out of Jerusalem. So Jesus says, make disciples of all nations, beginning in Jerusalem, outward to Judea, outward to Samaria, outwards to the ends of the earth. Acts 8, 9, and 10, the gospel's getting out of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. And it's a Hamite, a Shemite, and a Japhethite. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Let's go to an online question real quick.
She's had her hand up after the online question. Okay, all right.
Online question reads, where do we draw the line when a boss or manager disrespects us and turns the other cheek? Do we let others disrespect us and turn the other cheek, or do we stand up for ourselves and demand respect?
Yeah, I'm only comfortable answering those questions when I know the details of what's going on. A lot would have to do with, is this your career job, or is this a job that you're just doing and you could do 1,000 other jobs? All of that, because, I say that because, as an American, you have religious freedom, correct? You have the freedom to worship as you want to worship. And that's something that is worth fighting for sure. And if it's, certainly if it's a boss or something like that, that should not be a workplace that is allowed to do that. If it's people you're working with, it's just, your colleagues or whatnot. I think there's great ways of having conversations with people that are kind of mocking. When you categorize your Christianity, when you realize that your Christianity is literally the best thing for them, they just can't possibly see it right now. But when you're practicing your Christianity, you're speaking your Christianity, and you're getting mocked for it, to help them to realize that you want to make your Christianity known because you have not found a reason why Jesus' claim that he rose from the dead and therefore when you die you shall live. to simply say, I believe that historic account. The beautiful thing about Jesus becoming a man is that this whole conversation about God, before Jesus ever became a man, the whole conversation about God was in the realm of philosophy. It's just this philosophical idea about God, and we think philosophically to see if we believe in God or not. But Jesus coming to the earth means we no longer have to address it philosophically. We can now address it historically. Just like we talk about who the first president was, or the 10th president was, or who was the king of England 200 years ago. These are historic people now that really walk the earth, and the Bible is great about saying things like, this happened when this person ruled at this place and this time. In fact, the Bible gets accused of being boring because all the names, dates, and places. But all these numerous names, dates, and places are pinpointing these people historically in time. It's given the reality of them. And archaeology is such a great friend of ours because it's always turning up these Bible places and people and everything else. It wasn't long ago, it was in our lifetime, that we didn't have any evidence for King David. Now we found coins with him on it. So it's you know, so to have a conversation with colleagues and just go, you know, what is it that you don't believe that he rose from the dead? And they're probably going to say, just too fairy tale-ish, he rose from the dead. Well, then how do you explain the lives of the apostles that completely changed? They went from cowards running away in the Garden of Gethsemane to people that you could not stop even when you're about to execute them. They will keep on talking through their execution. In one day they changed. How does the Apostle Paul go from the greatest persecutor of the church, and on the same trip that he's going to persecute the church, he ends up the greatest apostle of the church? On the same trip. Psychologically impossible to happen, but it happened. So I would just say, explain it to me. Like when people disagree with my interpretation of the Bible, I just say, teach it to me your way. Let me see how you teach this passage. Okay? Let's see how you do it. And I've never had anybody teach it in a way where I go, oh my gosh, I was wrong, you're right. Right? They just have ideas of how they think things should be. And you know, a good way to start is this. What would be better? Like if somebody's talking to me and they're like, you Christians, you're fairy tales, you're this or that. Like Bill Maher recently said, it's the most, the most stupidest fiction written or something like that, he called it. But to simply say, what would be better? What would be better? If there was a heaven and we're given a way to go to it, or if there weren't a heaven and there's no hope of heaven? What would be better? Obviously, if there's a heaven that we can get to, correct? Well, my claim is that that's true and it's accessible. So shouldn't you thoroughly investigate the best claim first until you can eliminate it? Pursue it. Because how foolish are you going to feel if it was there the whole time and you didn't do what was needed to actually go there? What a fool you'll feel like for all eternity, right? So what have you done to fully eliminate the possibility that heaven's real? Because shoot for the stars until you realize they're not really accessible, right? C.S. Lewis said, there's no longing of man that he can possibly experience that can't be met. What can man possibly long for? Food, companionship, sex, safety, shelter. They're all accessible, correct? Every longing of man can be met. And so C.S. Lewis said, the greatest longing of man has been to never die. So it would be impossible for him to desire that if it couldn't be met. There must be a way to meet that because it's a true desire of mankind. And you prove it every time you cross the street and look both ways. You want to go on living, don't you? Yeah, you want to go on living. You chew your food because you want to go on living. You don't want to choke to death. So we're always doing things to keep on living. We desire to never die, and therefore, based on just how we're wired in our desires, it must be able to be met somehow. So I would just challenge them. My answer is this. Just challenge them. Wouldn't it be best if my way were true? And if until you can eliminate the possibility, why wouldn't you check out and see if there's strong evidence for it? And then, if you're still listening, this is a long answer, go to the apologetic section of the website and look at those proofs of the existence of God, where God, through those proofs, is necessary. And it's all science that I'm teaching there. It's not religion that I'm teaching there. Just through the study of science, there's no explanations for these things except God. And I show Richard Dawkins pretty much admitting to that. I show Stephen Jay Gould pretty much admitting to that. Check those out, I would say, as well, and use those at work. So I don't think there's ever been a solid reason for dismissing the greatest possibility. Pascal's wager, look that up. That's a good thing to show people, which basically says, you know, the only way to prove a negative statement, it's impossible to prove a negative statement. You can only prove positive statements. Atheism's statement is there is no God. That's a negative statement. It can never be proven. So when people say to me there is no God, I'll say, how do you know he's not sipping lemonade behind Jupiter right now? Prove it. You can't. So maybe he is sipping lemonade behind Jupiter. You have no way of telling me he's not. So you can't say there's no God because you don't know enough to say that. And that's true of all atheists. They don't know enough to know for certain there is no God. So Blaise Pascal said, because it's impossible to be 100% certain that there is no God, it becomes utterly foolish to be an atheist, because if the Christian is right, then they go to heaven and it's glorious. If the atheist is right, then the Christian just ceases to exist. So there's the two things for the Christian, heaven or non-existence. But if the atheist is right, then he doesn't exist when he dies. But if the atheist is wrong, he goes to hell forever. So here's the two Christian possibilities, heaven or non-existence. Here's the atheist, hell or non-existence. He says, so Blaise Pascal will say, if you're going to sign up for a package that only contains hell or non-existence, the only reasonable way to embrace that is if you're 100% certain it's true and you just have to live with it. But they can't ever be 100% certain, therefore atheism is utterly unreasonable. You have to be an unreasonable person to embrace it, because you're sinking your own ship without any proof that it needs to be sunk. Sunken? Sank? Something? Drown? Yeah, something like that.
All right, we got 3 questions left, one here, then we'll go to online, and then over on this side.
Hello.
Hey.
So if the gospel is available to everybody and nobody is without excuse, how does a man from 1,000 years ago who's deaf, mute, and blind, how does he receive the gospel?
I can hear my wife shouting at me now saying, tell him about Helen Keller. Yeah. Because the last time somebody asked that, I tried to explain it, and I never mentioned Helen Keller, and she's like, what about Helen Keller? So Helen Keller was blind and deaf either from extremely young age or from birth. I don't remember which. But you know, she, you know, how, what's the lady's name that tried to teach her? What's her name? Annie Sullivan. So, you know, Annie Sullivan's trying to teach her to communicate. And the main way she does it is put things in her hand, let her feel it, then take it from her, and then sign what it was. But if you're blind and deaf, you don't know what's going on. You know you're given something, it's taken from you, and then they tickle your hand. And you're like, what is this, right? Well, when it finally dawned on her that whatever this is telling me what that was, then all of a sudden she became a great, great learner. She wanted to know everything. She kept, you know, trying to put together what is this compared to that, and you know, and she ended up being a brilliant, brilliant woman, right? So she was asked at some point, you know, do you believe in Jesus? You know, do you know Jesus is God? And she answered, her answer was, I always knew God, I just didn't know his name. So how did this blind, deaf girl know God? Blindness and deafness is not a barrier to God making himself known to somebody. Even 1,000 years ago. Because somehow that was a worse blindness or deafness, I guess. I don't know why you brought it back 1,000 years, but yeah. Isn't that a tremendous answer she had? I always knew God. I didn't know his name was Jesus. Now I know his name. That's really cool. Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor Bill. The second online question is the Earth 6,000 years old or 4.5 billion years old?
It is. It is. And I mean it. Okay, now here we go. You ready? So if you're really curious about this, look up a scientist named Dr. Sarah Salmeander. She was an atheist, and now she has a Christian blog, Christian website, all that. And what changed her was doing research. You know, do you know we can detect the radiation from the Big Bang? It's floating out there, and we actually have equipment that can study the radiation left over from the Big Bang. So she figured, hey, that radiation's been around since the beginning of the universe. So if I can date that radiation, I'll know how old the universe is. And because it's energy that's floating around, it has light waves or particles, whatever. It's got something that she can measure. And as she's measuring it, her math, her estimates include the adjustment for the variation of the speed of time, because time is affected by gravity and velocity. So in heavy gravity areas, time goes slower. In high velocity areas, time goes slower. Our jets that go supersonic speeds, they have to adjust the clocks because time goes slower at supersonic speed than it does for us right here. That's why Einstein said if you ever get in a ship traveling at the speed of light, the person that goes on the ship for an hour and comes back is going to find everybody else here about 70 years older. Isn't that crazy? All right? So with that adjustment of time that she was putting in all of her equations, the estimate of the speed of time at the point of the Big Bang was that it was about 1 trillion times faster than it's going now. So as she adjusts for the speed of time in her study, what she found was that when she adjusted for the speed of time, the universe was only thousands of years old. I think she had like 100,000 years old. But when she only used time like it's traveling for us right now, it was 14.6 billion years old. So her conclusion was, we're saying the same thing, we're just using different clocks. If you don't adjust for time, then you're going to say the universe is 14.6 billion years old, but if you adjust for time, you're going to say it's 100,000 years old. So when people say, do you believe in a young earth or old earth, I always say, yeah, I do. Isn't that crazy? That made her a very active believer, like blogging Christian things and all doing this science. Dr. Sarah Salmander. You should check out her stuff. What I just gave you was a PowerPoint that I used to teach from, but then when I went to get it a few years ago, there was a fee involved with getting it, so I didn't pay it.
That's what we have John for.
Yeah, paying our money, yep.
Hello, Pastor.
Hi.
My question is regarding a statement you said earlier regarding the Ethiopian eunuch. How in the Catholic Church that you said that you believe that he started the Catholic kind of church.
That he started the Coptic Church?
Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. So in your explanation of how they write the names up and they can look at the reflection in the water, also they preserve them by having them called Father or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
He's called Father, yes.
In Matthew 23, verses 9,
don't call anybody Father.
Yeah, I wanted to understand.
I didn't say they were right for doing. I'm just saying that's what they do.
Yeah, because I want to understand. Is there different type of
Father?
Different type of in the Catholic Church because you.
Yeah, that's the real question. Is the Catholic Church right? Seriously.
Because I thought that the priest came from the priest we have today. Emerged from the previous priests went on the time of Jesus, the rabbi and so forth from the Catholic, and then we evolved from them, we came out of them, and we become Christian because of the stuff that they were doing. And today they're still doing the same thing, and they do not accept Jesus being the higher Lord. They still keep him as a baby. So they didn't accept him back then, and they still doesn't accept him today. And then they still having us worship Mary or all the other saints and stuff. So, but they have us calling them Father. So, as the eunuch accept Jesus, And I want to know what, yeah, regarding Jesus says, do not call anyone father here before the eunuch accept Jesus. And here again, when you said that, he started the Catholic Church and then they called him father.
Yeah. So, I think just like we call Abraham the father of our faith, and I think in those terms, we're talking about who started something, right? I think what's being forbidden in the Matthew passage is referring to a single man as the father of your faith rather than the father of your personal faith. Like faith came from the man, right? So I think it's directing us away from that. But I think we can say Abraham's the father of the faith. He was the first one chosen by God to start because God gives us that idea. Because God says, your offspring will be as numerous as the stars of the sky. So who has the offspring? The Father, right? So I think that's fine to say somebody fathered a church or things like that. But when I say, where did my faith come from? I'm not to point at a man that goes, he's the father of my faith. See what I'm saying? And I think that's what the Pharisees were doing. Like, they were jealous of Jesus getting a following, and they were claiming this authority of like this fatherhood authority over them and trying to get them off of Jesus. And so I worry about the Catholics calling themselves father. I do. I worry that they ask people to call them father because they didn't start a church. They're not people that started anything, but they're saying, I'm fathering over your personal faith. I think that's what's being forbidden there.
Hold on, we got to get you on mic. Nobody can hear. Hold on 1 second.
Look at John packing up early.
Hey,
he's already
this
on
is
vacation.
his last day of work for the year, man.
He's already on vacation.
He's already gone. He's thinking about turkey legs.
Look, he's got to put the mic batteries back in.
James is already packed up. We are done. Oh my goodness.
I got nothing to say to that.
He's got the Uber outside.
Mike said last question, so.
No, I was wondering, like, is it the Catholic, I mean, not the Catholic, is it the eunuch, what's his name again? The eunuch, what was it together?
Coptic.
Yes, the Ethiopian eunuch, I'm so sorry. Is that him that started the Catholic Church period, or is just that it's evolved from the... I'm sorry?
Not the Catholic Church.
He didn't start...
Not the Catholic Church, the Coptic Church.
Oh, Catholic. I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you mean Catholic Church.
No, not the Catholic Church.
Thank you for
Yeah, it's
clarifying.
different. Yeah, it's a different, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I go now?